Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I am TJ Whitehead, Powers Taken Not Given, joined for the first time by BlerdRonner. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thanks, TJ, for having me.
No problem at all. Been looking forward to this for a while. I sent BlerdRonner an invitation, well, not an invitation, but a request asking if he'd like to be interviewed sometime. Right around the time I sent a flurry of these out here when we all thought TikTok was going away, or we weren't sure if it was or not. And so it didn't set up until recently, but I'm very happy to get you on board. I'm trying to remember when I first ran across your content. I feel like it was recent, like last year or something. And I reached out to you, but I
Yeah,
love
I
it.
think that was the first time we connected.
Yeah, how long have you been doing it?
I've been on TikTok now. It'll be 3 years in May.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's about the same amount of time I've been doing it. I'm pretty sure I started in April or May of 2022. So yeah, all right, we'll get to that. We'll get to the story on how that happened here. So I have so much to discuss here, man. And our content is there's a great deal of overlap when it comes to the religious indoctrination stuff and the addressing the problems that we have and how much we can trace back to I hesitate to say just religious extremism. That's obviously the worst, but I think the problem goes a lot deeper than that, and we can go into that in a little bit. But if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your background, where you grew up and what your religious and political influences were early on in your life.
Yeah. Well, I was born a poor black child.
You sound like a politician giving a stump speech. One thing I cannot stand is I see politicians get up there and I was like, here I was born to working class. I don't give a shit. Tell me what your policies are, right? I don't need to hear a life story on that. So it's just funny you mentioned that, how often you hear shit like that.
Well, what's funny is that's a line from Steve Martin's movie The Jerk. And
The Jerk.
The beginning of that movie starts with him. Yeah, the beginning of that movie starts with him. He's like homeless and he's talking to the camera and he says, "I was born a poor black child," which is funny because obviously he's not black. So I used to always use that joke whenever I was giving a speech somewhere. But I think it dates me because these Gen Z millennials out here don't get that joke.
I've never seen The Jerk. I know of it. It's one of those films that you know of, but I know I've never seen it. So I went over my head. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Anyway, but answer to your question. So, I grew up predominantly in Southern California. For my formative years, raised by a single mom who was a devout Christian. That's sort of like where my Christianity started. I remember my brother and I praying the prayer when I was like 7 or some odd age, and so it was very important to me as a kid up through high school. Went to UC Berkeley. In college and through my 20s, I would say I still believed in God, but as they say in the Christian world, I wasn't walking with the Lord, as they would say. I was doing the things that single men in their 20s do. If you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so that but then in my late 20s, I got involved with this really cool church and I reconnected with my faith and I started really getting into my Christian faith again. I got into what's called apologetics, which is the defense of the faith. So I would do a lot of the ministries at church geared towards, seekers, people checking out Christianity or checking out the church. And I would read all the books, related to spreading the faith. And so, my faith continued to grow. Then I met my now ex-wife, but my wife on a Christian dating service. So that's how we connected. So I was married for a number of years, and faith played a profound impact on our marriage. And then I'm happy to say we had an amicable divorce. We still remain friends. But towards the end of my marriage, um, I was really in the middle of my deconstruction, which is where you're kind of reevaluating what you believe and why you believe it. And then that was right around the time uh, my deconstruction was right around the time of Trump administration 1.0. That prompted me to write a book called Dungeons and Durags, which was about basically a satirical memoir about my reconnecting with the Black community,
Hmm.
because I spent my entire adult life in a predominantly white world. And a lot of decisions I made in life were geared towards being in this white world and my Christian faith. And so in the book, Sam, a guardian angel in the form of Sam Jackson, comes to Earth to help me be blacker. And then the counter to that is more the voice of Morgan Freeman, just the voice, kind of beaming down. And it's kind of like two different ways of how to look at what it means to be Black in America. But a big part, a big theme in that book towards the last third was the role that my faith played in. So that just kind of grew. And then when I published the book in 2022, I said, I need to get out and start promoting it. And so that is what prompted me to start my TikTok account. Although I did more talking about the book when I first started, but I barely talk about
Yeah.
it now, which is funny.
Wow, man. All right. So much to go over there. First, so the first thing I wanted to mention is that you talked about how you accepted Christ and became not only a Christian at around 7 years old, which is fairly common. I'm sure you've seen the trend on
Yeah.
this. That it's one of those things that with all religion in general, it's if you remove that, if you don't have that in your life early on, you're not going to accept it as an adult, or you're a lot less likely to accept it as an adult. I mean, it does happen, but uh, someone coming up to you, it's I do this a lot, talking about people who debate their religion versus others. And it's funny you said that you would have studied apologetics, and I was deep into apologetics as well. And people think of apologetics as in defending Christianity against non-believers. That's part of it. But another big part is arguing against people of other faiths or other denominations and talking about, well, this is what the Bible actually says. This is hermeneutics, like defending what's in the word. And you hear about these other religions as a Christian, and you think, how can they believe this nonsense? This is ridiculous. You're telling me Muhammad flew to heaven on a winged horse? The moon was split into. This is the most ridiculous nonsense I've ever seen. And like, oh wait, is it any crazier than a talking donkey or the Red Sea parting and letting? No, it's not any more crazy. It's just stuff that you're used to already. And another thing with apologetics, this is so there was a big gap between your study of apologetics and your deconstruction. Like I mean, how many years was that?
I don't know if I would say there was a gap. So I did apologetics related ministries and things like that for like 20 years. You look at the time I started to when I
Yeah.
like stopped going to church. And so um I would technically say like, up until maybe Trump 1.0, I was still doing some form of apologetics in terms of
Wow.
still trying to defend the faith in terms of who Jesus stood for. And the kind of apologetics I did was more missional in the sense
Hmm.
that I would do ministries like the Alpha Course, which was created in England and it's now worldwide. And it's an opportunity for people who are checking out Christianity come have a nice dinner, see some videos, and have a safe discussion about what it means to be a Christian and things of that nature. And then as a filmmaker and a video producer, I would make a lot of videos that were apologetic in nature. So that's the extent. Like I never did like formal debates or things like that. But when Trump 1.0 came and I was a lot of the apologizing I was doing was actually against evangelical Christians. I started writing like around 2020. I started writing on Medium a lot, and so I was writing a lot of articles from the point of view of a progressive Christian trying to change the church from the inside.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to be that critical voice of what was happening in the name of Jesus from a person who was a Jesus follower. And I felt like that I could do some good that way, that maybe I could convince these other Christians that, hey, there's a better way. And then I came to the conclusion that a lot of those Christians didn't think I was a quote unquote real Christian
Oh
anyway.
boy.
So who was I performing for? Who was I performing for? And then I kind of, I in the spring of 2023, I had to come to the conclusion that I didn't really believe this anymore. I was trying to hold on to what little belief I had, and I think that's where I, for lack of a better term, came out as an agnostic atheist. So I'm wearing my No Gods, T-shirt, and I think that is kind of like where I stand now. But a lot of the themes of compassion, love, empathy, and justice still resonate with me. In fact, I say that my religion, quote unquote, now is truth, empathy, compassion, and justice. That's what I fight for. And if you fight for those things, I don't care who you worship personally.
All right. So what was it that that convinced or began your deconstruction? Like what was it? Because all right, so, which is always a difficult question, because it's never one thing. It's always like a spider web of stuff. And like for me, it started.
Although I didn't know the answer to the question.
Oh, you're all right. Let's go. What is it?
Yeah. No, I mean, I would say, and I want to hear your story too. But for me specifically, my deconstruction started in 2011. And it specifically started when Rob Bell, who's a popular evangelical pastor, well, he was, I don't know if you could call him evangelical now, but he's a popular speaker, Christian. He
Is
has
he
this
the
popular
dating
film
guy?
series called Numa. No, Rob Bell, I mean, you would describe him nowadays probably as a progressive Christian. He's
Okay.
like a thought leader. He had a lot of popular books like Velvet Jesus, but he came out with a book called Love Wins. And at the time, he was a pastor of this mega church in the Midwest. And he came out with a book called Love Wins. And up to that point, he was like a rock star in the Christian circles, because he was the kind of person who created videos and content that made people want to know more about Jesus. He talked about Jesus, and he did it in a way that was inviting. And he was safe, so to speak, for conservative and liberal Christians, because a lot of what he talked about was just Jesus. But then he comes out with this book called Love Wins, which essentially it suggests that everybody goes to heaven, which is called
I remember
universalism.
this.
And for
I remember this now.
Yeah, and for a lot of evangelicals, that automatically makes you a heretic. Actually, there's a documentary on Amazon called The Heretic, which is about Rob Bell. I strongly advise people check it out. So I was like, I heard about this book, and I'm like, wow, this seems to go against the Christian belief that you need to accept Jesus. So I read the book, and I remember thinking 90% of this book, 95% of this book is straight down the middle, good old fashioned Christianity. Like, it would be hard to argue with the way he's talking about Jesus and the power of Jesus. There's a small part that kind of suggests maybe God's love saves everybody, which, why is that a bad thing? So anyway, so then Francis Chan, who is another popular Christian speaker, came out. He, and I forgot the person he wrote a book. He came out with a book called Erasing Hell, which was absolutely a polemic and a counter to Love Wins. And I remember reading Erasing Hell and thinking, this is kind of, I don't know if freaky is the right word, but it even suggested that even if you are a Christian, you may not necessarily be making it if you're not doing the right things. And so it was the reading of those two books that kind of started me down this journey of like, now, wait a minute, I'm a Christian. I'm a nice guy. I'm trying to do good things. Are you saying I could still end up going to hell if I don't do the right things? So that was part of what happened. And then the other thing that kind of escalated it was my wife at the time got into this car accident. She was hit by a car.
Mm,
Thankfully, and to the day she deals with physical ailments related to that. But the in the first few years after being hit, the things that she went through, that we went through physically for her, it was one of those things that just made you question, like, why is this happening to us? We're good Christians, that kind of thing. So a combination of those things, it's kind of like what started my deconstruction journey. And then towards the end of my marriage, my wife and son and I, we were traveling a lot, and we would go to places, like we would spend half the time in Europe, 3 months
mm-hmm.
in Canada, and then 3 months in the US. And whenever we would go to Canada, like we go to an event or we see a speaker or something that's popular in many places of Canada is the indigenous land that they're on
Yeah.
at the beginning. And so we started learning about all this indigenous land stuff, which for a lot of Christians, that's satanic. Anything spiritual that's not related to Jesus
Yeah. Basically.
is satanic. But you learn about these indigenous beliefs about loving nature and animals and life. And I'm like, if this is supposed to be from the devil, he's doing a horrible job, because
Yeah.
this sounds like pretty good stuff. And the guy who supposedly represents Jesus at the time, Donald Trump, and all the evangelicals were saying stuff that sounded more like the kind of things the devil would like. So those kind of things, like the evangelical support of Trump, definitely expedited my deconstruction.
Huh. So so that I can see that, because yeah, it's is. I mean, we're going to get into Trump and evangelicalism. That's going to be a big part of this, guarantee, going for a little bit. But that,
Yeah.
I've heard this a lot from a lot of folks, that the ascendancy of Trump kind of made them reevaluate. Whoa, okay, what's going on here? I thought I was one of the good guys. I thought that I was fighting to protect the weak and the fatherless and the poor. That's what I was in for. But I don't see anything like that. I see nothing but vitriol and hate and white supremacy. Like I see that. I definitely do. So that, but you said your deconstruction started before that in 2011, and that
Yeah.
that led you down the path of, okay, I'm definitely on the wrong side here. What convinced you that God wasn't real after that? Because I tell those people, because I see that fall off a lot, but it's another jump to say, because I also correct, my one was when I first started looking at the construction of the New Testament canon. And I noticed that, well, I realized that they didn't even hide this information, that, oh, we actually don't know who wrote the Gospels, and the books of the Bible, for the most part, were all written around 100 years after the death of Jesus. But the canon, as we know it, was decided like hundreds of years later at the Council of Hippo by human beings who said, yeah, this is the divine inspired word of God. Take our word for it. It's like, no, why should I? Why should I take your word for it that this is actually the word of God? That, from that moment on, I couldn't call myself a Christian. It was another like 6 years, I think, before I realized I was an atheist, because I still had this kind of like a look at the trees type of argument. Oh, well, why is there something rather than nothing? This had to have come from somebody. And it took a while after that to realize that any God that exists has no contact with us. He doesn't have a party set up for us after we die. He doesn't answer prayers. He doesn't seem to care about us. There's no difference between that God and one that doesn't exist. So I guess I'm an atheist. It kind of hit me like that. So what was the transition for you for wow, this certain sect or this certain religion is not following anything that resembles a moral code I want to be associated with, to, well, actually, God's not real? Like, how did that change happen?
No, I think it's a great question. It's funny because so many evangelicals who despise the deconstruction movement, and they think all these evil deconstructionists are out to turn everyone into atheists, when they don't realize a lot of people deconstruct, and they just deconstruct into a different form of Christianity, which is, for me, it started out like that, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say I was always still kind of socially liberal, but maybe fiscally conservative type of Christian.
Yeah.
But what I guess what pushed me over, funny enough, was a combination of a couple things. One, I started reading books by and or listening to podcasts by biblical scholars, some of whom
Hmm.
still identify as Christian. So, for instance, Pete Enns,
I
he
know that
does the podcast Bible for Normal People. Very
name.
popular biblical scholar. He's a self-identified Christian, and I remember listening to a podcast by him, and he was saying some things that seemed to go counter to what I was taught as a Christian in terms of like what you should believe about the Old Testament, whatever. But I knew
Hmm.
he was a Christian, so that was
Right.
my first. And not believe that Adam and Eve were literal people. You can be a Christian and not believe that there was a literal flood. You could still
Yeah.
be a Christian and not even necessarily believe that Moses was an actual historical figure, because I was listening to people like him. And then so I read his book, like The Sin of Certainty. So that was transformational for me. But then I got on TikTok and I started actually listening to more biblical scholars. One of the most popular and one of the most despised among evangelicals is Dan McClellan, and he has, almost 900,000 followers, hugely popular among a lot of, funny enough, atheists. But he is also like a self-admitted Mormon, and it's funny because a lot of evangelicals try to discredit his videos about scholarship, claiming that he's a Mormon, but a lot of atheists like him because he just approaches the Bible from what the data actually means. And he makes it clear that he doesn't share like his personal beliefs. Anyway, I don't want to get into Dan, but the point is, I started listening to biblical scholars like him. And then there's another one, Kevin Carnahan is another scholar I listen to. There's another one named Aaron Agashi. So those are like my top 3 biblical scholars, all of whom, by the way, identify as Christian, particularly like Kevin and Aaron, and Dan even identifies as Christian. And then I found biblical scholars who were atheists too. But as I learned more about the things like you were saying, TJ, like, okay, like the gospel authors are not actually known; it's anonymous. I started learning all these things, and I started asking questions that prior to my deconstruction, at that point, I was too afraid to ask, right? Because when you are a Christian and you start hearing things that could possibly lead you to not believe, you, you
Hmm.
you- you're afraid to pull those threads because
Yes. Yeah.
realistically those threads could unravel your faith. So you don't
Yep.
even bother to pull them. So even though I always considered myself an intellectual Christian, there were threads I didn't want to pull. So when I got on TikTok and I was learning more about this biblical scholarship, I started pulling the threads that prior to that I was too afraid to pull. And then for me, it did unravel the sweater. And I just got to the point like, this doesn't make sense. And then actually,
Yes.
Christian
Yes.
TikTokers, the more I heard Christian TikTokers, they actually made me even more convinced that I made the right choice. Because when hearing them trying to jump through the hoops to basically back up and to justify the kind of things that I used to believe, it was like, okay, now that I can like look at this with a completely objective point of view, this do you curse on your podcast?
Yes. Yes. Feel free.
Okay, this shit doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
and and so I just got to that point where in my heart, like I'm not really believing this. And then once I get to that point, I was able to read even more, I learned about more, and I'm agnostic in the sense that, maybe there's that an all-powerful being that can create the entire universe, tens of thousands of galaxies, that powerful. I don't believe that being gives a shit whether or not two primates on a speck of dust sleep together if they're the same sex, or if
Yeah.
that God cares if you wear mixed fabrics, or if that God cares whether or not you eat shellfish, which ostensibly he at some point cared about because he wrote
He
about
did.
it supposedly in the Bible. Yeah.
Took
So
took a lot of
it's like,
time and meticulous effort on that. Yeah.
that's right. So that's how I got to the point where I'm at.
This is, oh God, I don't know what to attack first. All right. So first I want to talk about, you mentioned that you would look to biblical scholars and listen to them and everything, both Christian, both believers and non-believers, and what they had to say, which I recommend people do. This is the thing that gets me too, is that I can see how this would have been difficult for a Christian 40 years ago. Now there's no excuse. Now you have no excuse. Now you can find any question you have about the Bible. You are not the first person to ask this question. You can find all the information on it. And what they end up doing, what annoys me is, well, here's what Tertullian said, or here's what, Augustine said. And I'm sure they figured it out, hundreds of thousands of years. No, this is the best. And that annoys me. But you mentioned one name. You said you want to get into him, but I do. Dan McClellan. All right. Dan McClellan. I remember running across McClellan years ago, like you did, I'm sure. And I ran across him because whenever I would do a video on something the Bible said, I would keep seeing people tagging this account called Dan McClellan. It's like, hey, check this out. Well, what do you think? What does this guy say? And one video I made, and it was talking about, I don't know if you've heard this, where Christians a lot of times try to sanitize what the Bible says, and they try to say, well, the Bible doesn't actually recommend anything bad. And one argument I've seen with this is where there's a passage in Leviticus, and it talks about man shall not sleep with man, otherwise, then that's an abomination to God. And I saw so many people, I've seen people make videos on this, and well, actually, what the verse really says is man shall not sleep with boy, and that's a crime. So I was like, folks, that is not what it says. That is not what it says at all. It says that now. It says man should not sleep with man's abomination to God. And the reason that one way you could know how this argument falls apart is that they say that, well, this verse is actually protecting children against being, molested or pedophilia. It's like, well, no, because the punishment is that both people be put to death. So if you're telling me that this is to protect children, why is God demanding they both die? That doesn't make sense. You're just trying to make the Bible, whitewash the Bible, make it look good for modern audiences. Isn't it? Now, what it does say is not necessarily how we think of homosexuality, in that, like, the concept of like homosexuality or bisexuality, it wasn't really a thing, thousands of years ago. It's kind of like a modern thing that we've come up with. And their rules were that a low status man cannot penetrate a high status man. That was the rule right there. That upset the social order. Like, God really gives a fuck about this. Like, he went out of his way to tell folks that, well, I can't have that. This is not what I created the universe for. And I said, so yeah, you can say that it's not necessarily a blanket ban on like our concept of homosexuality. That's true. But it's certainly not saying that homosexuality is fine by God's eyes. That's still pretty repressive and gross and everything. You don't got to make the Bible say something it doesn't say to make yourself feel better. And I see people doing this shit all the time. And I made that video, and someone's like, Dan McClellan, what you think about this? And he had already made a video. And guess what? He said the exact fucking same thing I did, because that's true. That's in there. And I see it all. But with McClellan, I'm curious about McClellan. I wish I should reach out and talk to this guy sometime, because I don't fucking get it, man. I don't get it. Like, when you mention apologetics, I wrote down a note here. How are they not all atheists is what I wrote down under apologetics and stuff. And so with Dan McClellan, I was shocked to find out he was a Mormon. Shocked. He worked for the Mormon Church until recently, I think. And I was like, and then I see him making these videos. He's like, yeah, people say the Bible says this. Nope, doesn't. It's actually pretty bad. This is actually really awful. And that's what the Bible recommends. It sure does. I was like, okay, how are you still a Mormon? Or why are you still a Mormon? Like, Dan McClellan, and specifically Mormonism, because Christianity itself is already absurd. Imagine adding something 10 times more absurd on top of it. And then you got Mormonism. Joseph Smith was a convicted con man before he started this cult. And then you read how it started. I don't believe for a goddamn second Dan McClellan believes Joseph Smith. I don't know what's going on here. So I have you run across this? Because I just don't get it.
Yeah. So So here's my thing about Dan, what he believes. He makes a point to say when everyone accuses his Mormonism as the reason for his videos, and it's clear 99% of his videos contradict Mormon doctrine. And he has specifically said there's no data to support the Mormon doctrine about planets, all that other kind of stuff. So, like, it's so funny how they try to discredit him by pointing to his Mormonism, but his videos don't support Mormonism. So I'm like you too. It's like, so what's the deal? Like, he's a
What's
Mormon.
going
He
on?
identifies
What's
as a
going
Christian.
on? Yes.
Right, right. So here's my thing. Here's my thing. Like way back when in college, I drove cross country with this dude who became Mormon, but he chose to become a Mormon because he just liked the culture. Like he liked what was involved in the Mormon culture. As far as we know, Dan could be a cultural Mormon. Like maybe he grew up in the Mormon church, maybe he has friends who are Mormon, maybe he's in a nice Mormon community, maybe he's in a nice progressive Mormon. I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. And that's the thing for me personally. And I actually recently made a video about this. I really don't care what anyone believes when it comes to when you put yourself out there and you build a large platform, because Dan has a lot of people in the scholarly community who trust his biblical scholarship work. People like Pete Enns and those other scholars. So the other respected scholars around the world respect Dan's scholarship, regardless of the fact that he is a self-identified Mormon. But for me personally, here's what I know. This is what I know. Dan uses his considerable influence. Like I said, he has nearly 900,000 followers to speak for the marginalized. Oftentimes, when he talks about some interpretation of the Bible that is let's say not gay affirming, it goes against LGBTQ community, he will affirm that is let's say a reasonable interpretation from some verses of the Bible, but then he will tack on to that is something you choose to believe, because there are other verses of the Bible that you choose not to follow, like for instance slavery, or having your wife check to see if she's a virgin by whether or not she bleeds on her wedding night, and if she doesn't, unaliving her. I don't know if I'm so used to saying unalive when TikTok.
I never say unalive. It's like it sounds so strange to me. I can't do it. Or proving she actually was a virgin by parading a bloody sheet around the neighborhood to show, oh, look at that, she was a virgin. Yeah. So yeah, you pick up sticks in your backyard on any damn day you please. So yeah, unless you're gonna tell me you're following all the Mosaic law, yeah.
Right. And so what Dan does is he'll acknowledge that some verses can be used to say that homosexuality is wrong. But if you're going to do that, there are some verses that say to do these other things. And what he does is he'll say people use the Bible for their own political ideological bents, be they progressive or liberal. Understand that is what you're doing. And all things being equal, Dan is saying all things being equal, Dan is saying he is using his platform to fight for the marginalized. He speaks out against homophobia. He speaks out against transphobia. Those are the two things I've seen him talk most about. I've heard him speak out against things like misogynistic beliefs that a lot of Christians have. And when I've heard him talk about like the slavery that is clearly condoned in the Bible, I've heard him talk about how the crime and the transgressions that were done on Black people in this nation. So this is what I see. I see a man who is part of the most lauded demographic in this nation. He's white, male, Christian, cisgender, and heterosexual. He's at the highest point on the hierarchy, right? And he uses his power to help the marginalized. That's what I know. To me, that's what I care most about, that he's a person who's using his influence to speak out against Christian nationalism, to speak out against hatred and bigotry. And Dan is usually a very measured person whenever he
Yeah.
talks. The times in which he does seem to get more heated is when he's speaking out against homophobia, transphobia, and other bigoted. And to me, like I said in a recent video, Dan, you're invited to the cookout, because
Yeah.
I think that is what we need. And so I couldn't care less what he actually believes, right? If for a lot of Christians, they care because they see so many people flocking to his videos, and they hate the fact that so many people believe him versus whatever their evangelical stand is. So they get all caught up in their feelings about it. But I like I said, I couldn't care what you believe if you're using your influence and your belief to help make this world a better place. And a lot of evangelical Christians, frankly, are not.
They're not. They make the world a better place. I gotta get to that. There's a point I'll make about that too. The thing with McClellan, because Christians do attack him and saying that, oh, well, he's a Mormon. That was always a weird attack to me, because that has nothing to do with what's going on here. It's like, I mean, he could be a Zoroastrian for all I care. He's giving you what the words say, what the consensus is, what the historical context is, the context you guys claim to care about so damn often. He's giving it to you, and he's like, well, he's a Mormon, and I don't know. It's just like, it's very frustrating. It's more frustrating than most arguments that I'll hear from them. The commenter says a great point about acknowledging the reality of the hateful ideas the Bible supports, but still confronting Christians with how many other insane ideas the Bible supports, which they summarily ignore. Yeah, it is. It's a crutch that they lean on all the time without. That's actually one thing that always bothered me even while I was still a Christian, and you too, I'm sure, since you're doing apologetics, is how few Christians gave a fuck what the Bible actually said or knew at all. It's like, and I become an atheist. I use it all. Say, I shouldn't know your holy book better than you. You should know it better than me. You're the one who's saying this is the most important thing that for mankind. And with the making the world a better place, I titled this one about why Christians love Donald Trump. I think you talked about it recently about Trump and how. You shared a video by Josh Doss. That's right, talking about how Trump was a direct reflection of the Abrahamic God and everything. And I've been saying for a long time that Donald Trump reminds me a lot of the blustery fire and brimstone evangelical preachers I remember from my youth. He reminds me a lot of that, to the cartoony way he dresses and his stories and his larger than life personality, how he revels in the cruelty, like how much he loves it. Like, these guys really love the fact that their enemies, their opponents would be suffering for eternity. And I know
it's crazy.
Yeah. It's not the evangelical Christian cult or whatever. It's not about love. It's about hate. It's about hatred of taxes, hatred of science, hatred of medicine, hatred of gay people, hatred of black people. It's just hatred of knowledge, of college professors. It's just a never-ending list of people they despise and they want to suffer. And what you mentioned about wanting to make the world a better place is an excellent point, because here's the problem we run into. The reason that these folks love Donald Trump so much is because, the bigotry and the telling them that they're affirmed in their beliefs, that they are actually victims. They love that part. But when we tell them, look, these actions are going to lead to the end of the world, they don't believe us. But even if it was, they wouldn't fucking care, because to them, the end of the world is a good thing. That means Jesus is coming back. And when you have a group of people who yearn for the destruction of life as we know it, for the human race to be destroyed, there's really not a lot of negotiating you have there. You can't concern them with anything. And I want to make sure to stress this, that when I say that Donald Trump is in office and the people who share, I would say the primary reason he's in office is the fact that he has support from Christians. I am not limiting this to evangelical white conservative Christians, and they're the biggest category. They voted for him over 80%, 3 elections in a row. Donald Trump got a majority vote
Right.
from all Christians in general in the country. Like 58%, I think, of all Christians voted for Donald Trump. So that's not my problem. Okay, that's on them. Like, they need to figure this shit out. If people want me to yeah, well, it's not all Christians. Fine, I know it's not all Christians, but it's a majority of Christians who went out and voted for him. And if you want to say, well, not all Christians voted, okay, the majority of Christians either voted for Trump or couldn't be bothered to vote against him. So I'm not going to pretend that's not the case. And so I have a problem with, and this is, I don't know, we might disagree on this one. I wasn't expecting this, with not caring what people believe. Because yeah, true, like, people can believe whatever they want. I can't change them. I can't force them to. No one can make you believe anything. But if you're telling me that, yeah, I'm willing to believe in superstitious nonsense with no evidence whatsoever, all right, that tells me something about you. It does. Like, it absolutely does. Like, people don't believe things in a vacuum. You're not going to just believe something weird and not let that bleed into the rest of your life. I don't believe people when they say that. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I think that that's why I always come down to, what are your actions? Like, when I say I don't care what Dan believes, one, we really do not know what he believes. We can make assumptions, right? We can infer based on what he says, but there are many ways to be Mormon in this world. Just like there are many ways to be Christian or Jewish. And so the assumption that just because he belongs to the LDS church, that he acts or lives a certain way, or even has certain beliefs, like, we shouldn't automatically just jump to that conclusion. But again, even if in Dan's heart he believes that he's going to have his own planet, Xena somewhere, I don't know what it is. I know they have some crazy planet belief. Even if in his heart that's what he believes, he's not pushing it. He's not trying to convince people of it. He's not out here apologizing. As a scholar, he's talking about what's the consensus among scholars, and on top of that, the actions that he is doing that are actions that are helping the marginalized. So that's what I mean by what I don't care what you believe. Because if you look at the people, like the people who voted for Trump, yes, they believe certain things, and their actions lead towards things that impact me. So, there was a time when I believed it was a quote unquote sin to live a gay lifestyle, even though I had friends that were gay, even though I would go to a gay friend's wedding, right? But I did not do things that would actively prevent them from living the life that they wanted to live. Like, I wouldn't speak out against them. I wouldn't necessarily do anything that would kind of stop them from doing that, because I felt like, okay, these are my personal beliefs. And so that's what I mean when I say I don't care what a person believes versus what they actually do.
Oh yeah, that's true. Like, your actions do speak louder than your words. They're what matter the most. And one thing that I've had to just like accept, just realize, is that atheists cannot do this on our own. We can't. If there's just no way. There aren't enough of us where, it's not popular. People don't trust you. They hear that you're an atheist and they think that, you're some sort of, misanthrope, which is hilarious when you look at the stats of like who's committing crimes and like see how many atheists are out there. It's not us, folks. I gotta tell you. So we need the Christians. And as much as I may want to say to someone that, oh, you believe in this ancient book, that it came from a triune deity who spoke reality into existence, and you're on a first name basis with the guy's son or something. You want me to believe that? That's absurd. I could think that, but saying it to their face is not going to help me, especially if they're on my side politically. We need them. Like we need them. We're not going to be able to do it on our own. And I don't know. It's strange to me. It will always be strange. But we Rome wasn't built in a day. We got to figure out how to do this. You mentioned the agnostic thing. I didn't plan on talking about this, but you said it. How do you feel about calling yourself an agnostic or an atheist? Because I am tired of this argument. I'm tired. I can't tell you how many times I told people that I was an atheist, and they said, "Oh, so you're saying that for a fact that God doesn't exist?" Or I was like, "Of course I don't know for a fact. Nobody could." well, I guess you're an agnostic. I said, call me whatever you want. Okay. And just call me whatever you fucking want. I'm so sick and tired of having this argument here because that's not what agnostic means. People think agnostic is some sort of middle ground of, well, I think there's a 50% chance God exists and a 50. No, like nobody thinks that. And that's what they assume agnostic is. And you tell them, well, agnostic just means you don't know. So technically we're all agnostic. And you start talking in circles and shit. So I'm
Right.
quickly getting to the point where I just don't say atheist to people who don't know what I'm talking about. I was like, here are my beliefs. I don't know if there's any deities out there. I don't see any reason to think there is one. If you could prove one exists, however, like whatever deity even means, I'm up for that conversation. I'd love to know. But until then, I'm just going to say I don't believe. But they don't like that. That certainly bothers them.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It's frustrating, but it's also understandable in terms of the terminology that is used in the zeitgeist to describe a person's belief or disbelief. And so when you hear atheists, you do tend to think an atheist is somebody who actively says that there is no God, which is why I just say I'm an agnostic atheist.
Yep.
Technically, I could say I'm agnostic, and it would communicate to people the thing that I'm trying to communicate to them. But there are some people who, and because Gnosticism or agnosticism is just as what you know, theism or atheism is what you believe or don't believe. So, like, I don't believe that gods exist, but I don't know for a fact that they don't. But like some atheists are Gnostic atheists. I would say it's few and far between where they feel like they know. Yeah, I mean, I never know one either, but technically you could. But for instance, but here's a nuance. Like I've met some people who all right.
You froze there for a second. You met some people who what?
Yeah, I would say there are some people who would say that they are Gnostic atheists when it comes to the Abrahamic God. Like they know that this God does not exist, but they are agnostic about whether or not some other God could possibly exist. And so I can accept that. And I kind of feel like that. Like the God that's described in this Bible, I'm almost definitely sure does not exist. I can't say for a fact that he doesn't. So maybe technically, I guess I'm still, but it does. As I recently said in a video, the math is not mathing.
Yeah. So that's funny because I do say that. I do say that I don't know if a God, well, once again, whatever that might be, exists or not. I do know that a God of the Bible cannot exist. Like the God as he is represented in the Bible. But the problem with this is that Christopher Hitchens made a comment about how he finds it ironic that people refer to God as a personal God, because like how actually accurate that is without them realizing it, that the God of the Bible is a different person to everyone who reads it. You can interpret it any way you want. It's like your idea of who God. I was having a conversation with my co-host on Left Wing, John Cooper, and he was saying that he gets annoyed when people say that Muslims and Christians worship the same God. I was like, well, they do. I mean, like it's the same. It's a continuation, It's like, and he goes, yeah, technically, but he's like, but technically, Adam West Batman and Christian Bale's Batman are the same character, but they're not. They're very. I was like, that's actually a good way to put it. I thought that was genius. That was a really good way to put it because,
I like that.
Yeah, you can. I'm sure someone could present me with their view of the Abrahamic God of, let's just limit it to the 66 books of the Bible, and present it in a way where I was like, okay, I guess that God could exist. But the way he's classically known, like the deity who said, let there be light, and he was three persons. He had a son and sent him to earth and gave the Mosaic laws. Decided that, like you said, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of galaxies. He crafted atoms. He holds them together with the four fundamental forces of nature, and decided, wow, to fix this problem of sin, I'm going to have people do animal sacrifices, slitting their throats for hundreds of years to cover their sin, and then send my kid to be. There's no fucking chance that a God that's that powerful and that intelligent fucked up on slavery or fucked up on owning women as sex slaves. This is insane. So no, that God cannot like logically exist in any way. And
right.
I know that for a fact, because Christianity is the religion I know the best, and I know enough about a few others. Like, I don't think that one is either. So yeah, being a specific agnostic atheist, all right, I'm on board with that. That's kind of true.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, that sounds like a video I recently made where I was asking Christians to make it make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense that this all-powerful being who made 10,000 galaxies, the only way he was able to save the human race for a situation that he conveniently set up,
made.
by the way, with if you believe in original sin and everything, that the only way he was able to actually save the human race was to come down and sacrifice himself to himself by going through like the most painfully spiritual and physical excruciating torture execution known to man. But it would only, he was going to go through all that, but it would only work for you if 2,000 years later on shaky evidence you believe in all this other crazy shit. Like, if I'm going to come to Earth and go through all that pain, I'm going to make sure it covers everybody. I'm like, if I'm going through all of this, everybody gets covered. I don't want to go through all of this and only have 1 out of 10 people actually have it help, because they're going to be required to believe all this other crazy ish in order for all this pain and agony that I went through to work. Like, he can create 10,000 galaxies, thousands of galaxies, but this was the best solution he came up with to save the human race. I don't think so.
You know, the one that I think of that always gets me, this one actually got me as a Christian. My favorite ones are the ones that like cracked the armor early on, but I found a way to like paper over it. Right. The Bible itself always seems strange to me because, so here we go. Like you said, we have all-knowing deity said that he has a problem with how do I get my message to mankind? How do I let them know here are the answers to the most important questions in your existence? I know what I'll do. I'll pick a few dozen people over the course of a few hundred years and have them write my thoughts and my will to them. I'm going to have it written in 3 languages. 3 languages alone. That's what's going to be written in. And I'm going to send it to a population that's 90% illiterate. They won't be able to read it. They're going to have to trust the words of the rich and the powerful to tell them what I think. And then it's like, no, if someone brought that idea to you, you would say, that's stupid. That is, why would you're just guaranteeing that these people will be slaves to those who already have the power by withholding the most important info they could have? It's like, oh, I'm not done yet. All right. So this information that I have, I'm going to keep it away from 2 continents for thousands of years. Like, I will go down and talk to my disciples myself and specifically tell them, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel, baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and not mention, hey, there's 2 continents of people out there you don't know about. Get someone on that. Like, start building boats right away. The last thing I want to hear is that it took 1,500 years for people to get this information. I look at this as like, there's no chance you can believe this. This is why I say that atheists actually have a higher opinion of God than believers do. Like,
totally.
What?
No, I was just agreeing with you. And what you said actually reminded me of one argument you hear from evangelical Christians as to like why God commanded the genocide of the Canaanites. He says, well, because the Canaanites were doing baby sacrifices and there were all these horrible things, and God needed to sell that. So what about Genghis Khan happening? Did God not care about what Genghis Khan? What about the baby sacrifices that were happening in South America by those? Did he not care about those? Like, this was not the only place in the world where people were sacrificing babies. But apparently, this was the only place that God decided he needed to save the babies from being sacrificed. Oh, by the way, he's ordering the genocide of babies because of baby sacrifices.
Yeah,
That makes
yeah.
no that makes no
I
sense.
I cannot listen. I cannot believe the hoops people jump through to defend this shit.
It's like
It is
Cirque du Soleil
it is
here, man.
it is comical. It is because these questions now, and the thing is, most of them aren't surprised by these questions. They've had them too. I was there. I remember
Yeah.
I was asking specifically about the genocides. And of course, you got the same answers that, well, look, these people were sacrificing their babies to Moloch. And I said, all right, so God said to you, you think everyone in that community was sacrificing babies to Moloch, including the babies themselves, apparently. Does that seem like God, and like God says, hey, kill the soldiers, kill the civilians, the women, the children, the infants, the fucking animals. I said, no. I need a better answer than they were bad people. No, that doesn't compute for me at all. And like the really funny ones are the slavery defenses. Those ones I can't get enough of those. I can't get enough of them where they'll say, well, you got to understand the ancient economy was dependent upon slave labor. So God's hands were tied. So you got to be kidding me. This is an insult.
He had no choice. He had to do it.
What was he going to do? What was he going to do?
What was he supposed to do?
That's what they say. They literally say that. We're not making this up. They'll say that, well, God, he couldn't tell them not to own slaves because either A, it would have destroyed the economies because God is limited by the primitive economies of ancient man. Like that's so iron chariots and primitive economies are God's kryptonite. And then they'll say, well, then my favorite one is when they say, well, God couldn't tell them that because, like, if he did, they just wouldn't listen. They would have owned slaves. And he's like, he told them, like, into excruciating detail exactly how much grain to use for a burnt offering. Otherwise, he would kill you. But no, I can't tell them to not own slaves. And also, if they wouldn't listen to him, why give them any rules at all? Like, why did he stop just short of like the most obvious example of immorality? Oh, also, side note on this, another great obvious example. Can someone tell me what the age of consent is in the Bible? Tell me. I'd love to know. I would love to know what the age of consent is in the Bible because it ain't fucking there. It's not. Like the closest thing you can get, there's a verse or two that says something about like the age of maturation or like when for women, I guess it's like when they're able to reproduce. So right. the age of consent is like 12 in the Bible or something, or whenever you hit puberty. If you hit it at 9, there you go. And it's like I think God could have like said, oh, by the way, don't fuck kids. Never bothered to do it.
Nope, he did. But here's the thing. They're so indoctrinated, they don't even realize how brainwashed they are. I was watching one YouTube channel I watch is called The Line, and it's this, and it's kind of like an offshoot of Atheist Experiment, and it's these call-in shows where people can call in, and it's usually like some believer, like a theist, a Christian, calling into these. The hosts are usually atheists, right? And it's like, tell us what you believe and why you believe it, and we're going to give you some pushback to have you think critically. And I remember there was this one call, and they were trying to talk, and the caller was trying to get the host was trying to get the caller to understand that the God of the Bible that they worship actually does some pretty messed up ish. And they were saying, do you believe that it is just to punish somebody for someone else's crime? The caller said, no, that's not right. So, okay. Now, since Adam and Eve had not eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, did they know right from wrong when God told them not to eat of the tree? And she said, no, because they hadn't eaten of the tree. They didn't even know right from wrong, good from evil, because they hadn't eaten of the tree yet. So she acknowledged that it's not right. And they said, do you think it is right to punish somebody for something that they didn't know? And she said, no. So do you think it's right to punish somebody for a crime they didn't commit? No. Do you think it's right to punish someone for something if they didn't know? No. do you think Adam and Eve knew that it was wrong to eat because they ate it? No, she affirmed all that. So with all of that, was it just for God to A, punish Adam and Eve, and B, punish the entire human race, curse the entire human race for something we didn't do and something they didn't know was wrong at the time they did it? Yes.
Yes. Every time. I just
It's, you can't, like you said, you can't make this up. Anyway, that is indoctrination. That is brainwashing.
Yeah, it is. And it's very fun. So I'm of two minds with this, because it's incredibly frustrating when you just lay out these facts to folks. And I remember having these thoughts myself and struggling with them. And
Right.
I don't remember like vehemently defending genocide in the Bible. I remember it really bothering me, right? I remember saying, wow, that's weird. Someone help me out. Like, there's got to be an answer here. I don't remember ever like berating someone saying, how dare you say this is wrong? Who do you think you are? You're not gonna. Maybe I did. I don't recall, because I remember it bothering me from a very young age. So it's funny when people will go to bat for, biblical slavery or, misogyny, or pretending the Bible is not misogynistic. I can't go. I can't keep going. I'm going to be here all day. But it is refreshing, but still weird. I still can't do it. I know not everyone thinks like me. I get it. But I sometimes I just like, how did you get here? But whenever like folks like McClellan or whatever, who are Christians, and like, hey, I'm just going to pick the good parts of the Bible and tell you the bad parts are there and try to spread a positive message and help people. Hey, I'm all for it. And I run across this with, you mentioned with Rob Bell. I confused him with another guy, but I remember that book because it was a big firestorm back in the day. I think it was like 20 years ago. I think it's been a long time that book came out or
2011. So it was
okay, well, so not quite 20, so 14 years ago. Yeah. And he was, I remember people being really upset because like BlerdRonner, Ron mentioned that I never read the book, but I remember people saying that he's a universalist. And for those of you wondering what that means, it's that eventually everyone gets to heaven. However it might happen, if you're a really terrible person like Genghis Khan or something, you may suffer in torment for 1,000,000 years or so, but you'll be purged and you'll be, however you get there, God's love is powerful enough. And I got to tell you, that made sense to me. It did, because like you mentioned, if God's plan to fix, his own problem is that I need to solve this problem of sin with humanity and be united with them, I'm going to sacrifice myself, and the power of my blood will cover their sin. Why wouldn't that be enough? Why would there need to be an extra step of someone else coming in, and a human being who is not God? I can't stress this enough. Human beings are not God. All right. It's like, I tell this people, like, people say that, well, God loves you and that's why he wants you to go to heaven. It's like, well, if he loves me, why would he send me to hell? That doesn't seem like something you do to someone you love. Well, no, you know what I'm going to say? You actually send yourself to hell. You send yourself. Like,
I cannot stand that.
I know. It's like, actually, you send yourself there, you see, because God is telling you, maybe you may never hear this news, but he's telling you at least, like, this is how you go to heaven. And if you reject that, you go to hell and you deserve it. And I said, okay, so in this analogy here, God is our father, right? And we are his children. If your kid was sitting outside in a blizzard and you said, hey, here's how you come inside and get warm, it'll save you from the blizzard. And your kid, like your 7-year-old, says, no, I don't want to. You're going to let the kid sit out there and die in the blizzard? Because that's what God's doing. God is telling someone who has no comprehension of the basic universe we live in, let alone a separate one that we've never seen before, and saying, all right, just take my word on this. This will work. And how could you blame like dumbass human beings, half a chromosome away from being chimpanzees, for not figuring this out? And you're going to punish them for eternity. I can't, what's eternity?
All times.
It's, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I wasn't saying anything. I was just co-signing.
Yeah, it's just like, think of the most, like, we have the most evil people that you can think of in human history or whatever. All the crime that they did, none of it adds up to an eternity of torture. None of it. None of it. You could put them through torture for 100 million years, 500 million years. Eventually, it's enough, right? Eventually, you've atoned for these crimes. You suffered way more than any suffering you've caused. But God, the all-loving, all-knowing God's like, not enough. Nope, stay there, consciously suffering for all eternity. Like, I don't believe that. Oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. I bring this up a lot to people, like for Christians that you know, because I'm sure you still know several believers, and I do too. One thing that I love to ask them, like people who know me, who are my friends, who know me for decades, and I say, okay, so I'm not a believer. I don't believe in any of this. I think it's nonsense. I don't accept that Jesus or God or anything like that. Do you think me, TJ Whitehead, the person you've known for 25 years, I deserve to be tortured in like excruciating pain for the rest of eternity? I love asking this because the answers that they usually give, it's the first answer they give is, well, I believe you were saved before. So no, stop. All right, no, like you can't have both ways, right? The eternity, don't play the security of the believer card with me. I'm not a believer, right? Now, assuming that I didn't actually get saved, like that person, do I deserve to be tortured for eternity? And then they'll say, well, that's what the Bible says. I did not ask what the Bible says. I'm asking, do you, like, if you were making the rules, is that what you would think is fair? They have a real hard time answering it. And then they'll eventually say, well, I might not, but I'm not God. It's like, okay, what if you don't think that's just, why would you trust a God who does? Now, if you ask this to a stranger Christian, yeah, they might say, yeah, fuck you, you deserve to burn. But I'm talking about people you know and love, and like who don't want to say, because look, if you do believe that, if they say, yes, you do deserve, that person's not your friend. That person does not have a high opinion of you. Like, you just saved yourself a lot of times. Oh, okay. Right. Well, this is the last time we'll be speaking. Have you ever run across conversations like that?
No, thankfully, the Christians that I know who I consider friends, well, actually, I've never specifically, the Christians who are still friends of mine, I've never specifically asked them that question. So it may be worthwhile. But I think it speaks to, and you see this again, like on call-in shows like The Line, you can almost hear their brain malfunctioning. You can hear something's going on where they realize they're about to walk into, for lack of a better word, like a trap. They're about to have to admit that they have a better set of morals than the God that they worship.
Yep.
And they have to fall back on what's, kind of referred to as divine command theory, which is anything God says goes. Doesn't matter. Like, any reasonable, compassionate, empathetic person would know that this is wrong. But if God does it, it's okay. It's okay it's wrong to kill babies. Like, abortion's evil, it's wrong. But God can kill babies all day long because he's God. He can kill David and Bathsheba's son as a punishment to David because, he's God. And there is no reasonable response to those kinds of questions. And it's hard for them to admit that it's unreasonable. And that's why there are some Christians, and if I were still Christian, this is probably what I would be. I would be like, I don't worship the Bible. I worship God. I believe that the God I worship is a loving, empathetic God. And I think there are aspects of the Bible that get it right. And I think the Bible was our best shot at trying to explain it, but it doesn't get it all right. And where it seems completely obvious that this is not a loving being, that's just man getting it wrong. And for a lot of Christians, that's a slippery slope they don't want to go down, because then you can just decide what parts of the Bible you throw in and out.
They're right.
They do that anyway. They do that anyway.
They do it anyway. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, they pretend. But that's oh God, man, we only got like 20 minutes. I know.
I can always come back another time, but yeah.
All right. So I wrote down about the divine command theory because I wanted to talk about morality, because how that relates to Trump. But before I do that, I want to go into that slippery slope part. That is an excellent point. Like, it is. Yeah. And that is why a lot of Christians are afraid. And it's weird to me thinking that Christians weren't always the way I knew them growing up. Like religious fundamentalism or Christian fundamentalism is fairly new. Right. Like, a lot of it wasn't seen that way. But I see why that happened, because if you're trying to tell me this makes sense fundamentalism, like, it's pretty simple or logically consistent in a lot of, well, I mean, it's not if you actually read it, but
Right.
like, because here's what it comes down to. Either the Bible is the word of God or it's not. Those are the only two options. That's it. And if people want to say, like you mentioned, well, some of it is and some of it, well, how do you know? How do you know which part? Like the part that comports to your understanding of morality in 21st century Western hemisphere, that's the correct morality. Right. Everyone else got it wrong. You got it right. And you happen to align with Almighty God. That is a slippery slope. And I see why it scares them, and it should, because like if you're just gonna, then who gets to pick what parts are real and what parts are not real? There's another Christian who will say, no, actually, this part is real. And we're right back where we started, since God never comes down and solves the problem. And that's all right. One more. I'm sorry, man. One more thing about this. I like when they say this, that, well, obviously these are just the words that like Paul's weird, his weird proclivities when he's talking about how women need to shut the fuck up. That's just Paul talking. That's not God. Like, oh, it's rather convenient. You wouldn't have said that 500 years ago. I guarantee. 500 years ago, like, yeah, of course Paul's right. Of course women don't need to talk. And so this is another thing where people have a low expectation for God, because here's how I look at it. Like back to like our scenario where we're God planning all of this. And okay, no, actually just make it a person. Let's say Ron wrote a book of rules for how human beings should live. You know, this giant book, 66 of them actually, in like a 39 book section and a 27 book section. Is like, here you go. These are the books of how to live your life. And then Ron checks back a few hundred years later, and he sees people wearing T-shirts saying Ron wills it, as people are just destroying entire populations, enslaving ethnicities, subjugating women, just burning the world down, and wearing hats saying Ron on it. It's like, hey, Ron said this is cool. I talk to Ron every Sunday. Ron said this is all right. I think it would be rather immoral for Ron to sit back and say, oh, well, hey, I gave him the book. What do you want me to do? I'm not going to go back and try to set this. No. Ron would show up and say, no, that's wrong. That's not what I meant. Here's an update on this. Ask me any questions you want. But what if Ron said, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sit back, let them argue, and hopefully the right ones win. You would see Ron as an immoral, just as agent of chaos, just a blight on existence. You would expect so much more from a mortal man than that they expect from God. And that's why it's insulting. Like, it's insulting. Listen, people shit on human beings a lot, but we are rather, intelligent mammalian species. Billions of years of evolution leading to this. You're capable of more than this, folks. You're capable of more than understand something like that. But the morality thing with divine command theory, I love that you brought this up, because the problem you run into is that they like to ask, well, if you don't believe in God, what is the basis for your morality? Gotcha. What do you base your morality on if there's no God? And it's like, well, I base it on what I think. I gotta tell you, I base it on, how I believe that sentient beings should be treated, how to maximize their potential, how to reduce as much pain and suffering as possible. That's what mine is based on. And you know what? I'm not right about everything. I got it. I'm sorry. There is no objectively correct way to build a house, right? You can't find it. There is no objectively correct way to have blueprints for a house. Now, we can objectively measure other things. Like, I want a house that keeps me dry in the rain. There are objective measures to tell what keeps you dry and what doesn't. That's what we're working on. So I want a society in which people are free. They're not being murdered, their property's not being stolen. They're not being raped. There are ways to prevent that from happening. But Christians, or believers in a lot of ways, don't have morality at all. They have obedience to authority. So like you said, not only is it okay for God to kill babies, it's okay for them to kill babies if God tells them. And you see this a lot, why they're so okay. If you're taught in this fashion that there is an authority figure, he tells you what to do, you follow him. It manifests itself in the political ways with the current rise of religious extremism and their politics. Because I got to tell you, when people wonder why we spend so much time worrying about these folks, this is why. Look around. Everything you see these last couple of weeks is exactly why. Because it's terrifying. People think that they don't actually believe this. No, they do. They do. They want to, use this this political power to further a religious extreme agenda. And I'm kind of worried. I don't think we took these folks seriously enough.
No, absolutely. And the whole morality thing, when they ask you how do you determine your morality, what they're really asking is how do you justify the morality that you have? Because a lot of Christians will say, okay, yeah, you can determine your morality from empathy, or you can determine your morality from some of the things you talked about in terms of your desire to do things that help make the world a better place, et cetera, whatever. But how do you justify that? Because if I have a different idea of how to do that, and you have a different idea of do that, then we have why is your idea better than my idea? We have no way. And it's this appeal to some authority that can justify whatever morality you have. And what they don't realize is the morality that they are appealing to is just, and they think it's objective, but it's just as subjective as anybody else.
Subjective.
It's their interpretation of what they think God would want you to do or say. And the thing is that you don't need a justification for a person's morality, especially since 9 times out of 10, a lot of our morality is the same. Like me and some of these Christians will both agree that it's not right to like kill somebody unjustly, stuff like that. Just because you appeal to some God, but like you said, TJ, if at some point you think God is telling you to kill somebody, then your appeal to that authority, your appeal to that justification is now going to run foul with my desire to not be harmed or to not be killed or to not be punished in some other way, right? To not be living in Gilead from like a Handmaid's Tale. And so when you're in a pluralistic society where everyone has different beliefs, the best form of morality is one that helps everyone in the community, progress and grow and stay alive. And what reduces the most amount of harm and increases the most well-being. That is a good foundation for morality. And that's the best justification that I think anyone needs.
Yeah. And the problem that they run into is harping on like the justification part. Like hard, just focusing on it with the laser and saying, well, if I don't have like an actual rule book telling me, how do I know it's right? You don't. Okay, I'm sorry. Right. I wish this was an easy question, but it's not. You don't actually want to figure out morality. You want someone to tell you the answers to the test, and there aren't any. Okay, like this is just how we figure shit out. And it's incredibly frustrating because they act like since you don't have like a rock solid answer that you must be wrong because I made up an answer, so I must be right. Say no, that is not how like this works in any sense or it's not in any fashion at all. Oh God, I'll say something about morality and judge. I can't remember what it was, but it was good though. Trust me, folks, it was good. But I forgot to comment here. It's like I can't believe how obvious the insanity of ordering people to genocide infants as a punishment for infant sacrifice in the culture. Yeah, I know, right? That is insane. And yeah, no age of consent in the Bible. Yeah, it's just the appeals to what's in the Bible is just saying I'm willing to accept what someone tells me as an answer without wanting to put in the work myself. And they get really threatened when you say, well, I just want to put in the work and we're not going to get everything right. 100 years, like I act like I'm all, cool and progressive now. 100 years from now, I'm not a chill dude. People are going to look back at stuff that I thought and I said like, wow, that was some problematic shit. I'm trying, right? I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I have that. And this is something that's funny is that they'll say that, non-believers are arrogant or whatever. Like Christians have breathtaking arrogance. I mean, it is astounding. They're saying that, oh, me, I'm just an emissary from Almighty God. Look how humble I am. It's like, no, we're just people, just like you and me. But I wanted to ask you, like, how this bleeds into politics and how you've seen this over the years. So you said you were a a liberal conservative. You were like what do you say, fiscally conservative and
I said it
socially
was like
liberal.
kind of like fiscally conservative, socially liberal, kind of socially liberal, I should say.
Yeah, I was kind of like that too. Like I remember in the early 2000s, people discussing gay marriage. It was a big topic back then, and I said I can't give you a good reason. Even as a conservative, I was like, I can't really find one thing. I looked, I was looking, and the only one I could find was that, oh, look, in these countries that have allowed gay marriage rates went down. And even I was like, well, that means that even back then, I was like, that's a weak excuse. Like marriage rates being
Right.
high isn't a axiomatic good. So I ran across that a lot. But over the years, have you noticed this getting worse? Because to me, it kind of has. I was like, I'm shocked, honestly, that the stuff that you see people say in public now, you wouldn't have heard 15 years ago. Like it's actually
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's actually getting worse. What have you seen?
Well, I mean, it's I think Christianity is used as an excuse to justify inbred bigotry and hatred that people already have. Honestly, I think if you just look at what's been happening in the past 2 weeks, a week or so ago, you had Bishop Buddy say in one of the most calm, collected, compassionate ways, "Hey, Mr. President, have mercy on people who are scared." She wasn't saying you had to be gay affirming. She wasn't telling him what to do with his border policy. She wasn't saying not to have a secure border. She was appealing to what modicum of humanity he might have. I think that day confirmed he has none. Hey, show mercy on people in this country right now who are scared, right? And Christians, evangelical Christians, always like to say, hate the sin, love the sinner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when this compassionate bishop said, "Hey, have mercy," the backlash she has received, and I mean, she's called a witch. She was called demonic. She was called all these horrible things for asking for mercy. And I believe the reason why they were calling her demonic and everything is because she was asking for compassion on trans and LGBTQ kids. If she
Mm-hmm.
never brought up trans and LGBTQ kids and just focused on immigration, she would still have gotten hate, but I don't think she would have had people calling her demonic. Whenever you bring in LGBTQ issues, that is when the D word comes out. That's when they start calling things demonic. And that just kind of showed to me, oh, because empirically you cannot argue with the 100 or so odd verses in the Bible. There's a lot of terrible stuff in the Bible, but there's also a lot of good stuff. And 100 or more verses are about how to treat the immigrant, how to treat the foreigner.
Mm-hmm.
That's some of the good things. There's
Yeah.
maybe half a dozen verses about homosexuality, but somehow those 6 are more important than the 100 about the immigrant. And so the reaction that she got for asking for mercy kind of like proved to me, oh, they don't really care about the sinner. They don't like the gay people. They don't like trans people. And if you speak up for them in any way, you are demonic. Because in nothing she was saying was she even affirming
Yeah.
that that's okay to have that lifestyle. She was saying
Yeah.
people who are real people in those communities are now afraid. Have mercy on them. And so it's just crazy. That to me, that was the proof that, oh, this is really about you think this stuff is weird, or you hate it, or whatever your bigotry is, and your religion is a convenient way to justify that hatred, because you
Mm.
don't have an issue with billionaire oligarchs, despite the fact that Jesus had a lot to say about the rich. You don't have an issue with that. You don't have an issue with the fact that Donald Trump literally represents 0 fruit of the spirit, which are, love, kindness, patience, forbearance, all these things that Paul talks about. And he represents every one of the 7 deadly sins. You don't care about that because he is putting forth a political ideology, a hatred, or whatever that already affirms to you. And what I find interesting, this nuance, is a lot of Christians who support Trump think that he's chosen by God. Like God, he
Yeah.
even said, God chose me to make America great again. And I recently did this video and I wrote this piece that said, I do believe that Trump is blessed by God, but not the God that you think about. The God, and this is speaking using Christian language, the God of this world is Satan, essentially. And we learn in Matthew, I think it's in Matthew, where Jesus goes out in the desert and the devil says, hey, I'll give you fame and fortune if you just bow down to me. So that proves Satan does have the power within a Christian framework, has the power to do for Donald Trump everything that we see Donald Trump. So what makes more sense? That the reason why Donald Trump has all the things and he's like Teflon Don because the God of the universe has blessed him, or is it because the God of this world has blessed him? Again, speaking from, I don't believe in either, but speaking from a Christian point of view, it would make more sense that the reason why Trump is able to do what he does is because if you believe there's a God of this world who can grant those things, that's probably who is giving him all the power that he has. And it's wild that so many Christians are duped, but they don't even see it.
Yeah. Donald Trump is like an obvious antichrist. Like if the antichrist was real, it would have to be Donald Trump, right? Like it's right there.
So
and yeah, like he'd be the obvious candidate, the most obvious one I've seen in a long time. And okay, so with the thing that they're using Christianity to justify their bigotry, yes, I mean, it's not wrong, but I hesitate to say that. I actually don't like that phrase because
which
I
phrase?
think that they're just using Christianity as a convenient method to justify their own personal bigotry. And the reason that it doesn't sit well with me is because for a lot of them, Christianity is the reason they have the bigotry in the first place. Like if you look at sorry, like what we were mentioning with homosexuality, that in the ancient world, like the pre-Christian world, the concept of boxes of people as homosexual, heterosexual, bisexual did not exist. An example I use about this is like if you look at, like Roman culture or something that they're so obsessed with these days and everything. Julius Caesar, like a man's man, Julius Caesar fucked a lot of dudes. He fucked a lot of dudes. All right, that's just how things were back then. And if you went to Julius Caesar and you said, hey, Julius, my name is TJ and I am a heterosexual. He says, oh, heterosexual, what's that? And it's like, well, that means I'm a man, so I only have sex with women. I think that it's wrong for me to have sex with men. He'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? It would be like someone coming up to you and saying, yeah, I only sleep with redheads. I think it's a crime and a sin for me to sleep with anyone who doesn't have, it would be just as weird. So Christianity, though, comes along, like, at least in the modern version of it. Now there is a giant stain on the idea of homosexuality, and it's seeped into all Western culture in a way. And I think of this too with Adolf Hitler and how people talk about they act like anti-Semitism just sprung out of nowhere in the 1930s, and Hitler's like, oh, actually, I have an idea. How about we be anti-Semites? And no, anti-Semitism dates back thousands of years in Europe. And I point to Martin Luther a lot. Like, I'm sure Ron knows about this, but Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism for 500 years ago, Martin Luther was a raging anti-Semite. Like, I'm not just trying to besmirch the guy's reputation here. Right. He wrote a book. You can check it out, folks. The book is called On the Jews and Their Lies. That's the title of the book. That's just the title. It does not get better from there. And if you read it, he says, oh, you know what we should do with these Jewish people? We should kick them out of their homes. We should burn down their businesses. And if they refuse to leave, we should put them in forced labor camps. That sounds pretty similar to what, Adolf Hitler did and everything. And so the problem of anti-Semitism predated the Holocaust that we care about, that we think about. And so I think that the bigotry that people use the Bible to back up predates them using the Bible to back it up. Is actually part of the culture that's involved there. And the chosen, I wrote down the Trump chosen by God thing, because I'm on board with you here. I've seen for 10 years now Christians saying that Trump is a man of God. It's very funny when they compare him to like King David or something, because it's like, look, yeah, King David had a lot of flaws, but the guy was a competent politician and warrior and commander. Okay, you can't say anything about this about Donald Trump.
And he was
Like, I
also
never.
contrite in the things that he did.
Yeah, have you heard Trump apologize for anything? David,
Never.
a shitty guy as he would have been, he does say, "Hey, I fucked up. That was wrong. I shouldn't have done that." He had some humility. Trump has never had an ounce of humility. But with God being chosen by Trump, I used to say, "That's ridiculous. What's wrong with you?" But now I got to tell you, it's kind of hard to argue against them. It is. I mean, the fact that Trump won these like 2 elections. He won this one. He's the first Republican to win the popular vote in 20 years. He got shot at and survived.
But see, that's my point. Yeah, if you believe in the spiritual realm and you are a Trump Christian, you could look at that and say, see, that proves that he's blessed by God. I would say, no, that proves he's blessed by the God of this world, because the God of this world can do all those things.
Yeah.
It makes more sense that God had the bullet miss Trump but kill a fireman.
Yeah.
Or the God of this world had the bullet miss Trump and kill a fireman. Like, which one of those two gods makes more sense, right? So yeah, I do believe he was blessed by a God, if you believe in that kind of thing, but it makes more sense he's blessed by the God of this world, not the God of the universe.
Yes, and so this is fun playing with these imaginary characters. Yeah. It's really funny here. Where I was going with it, though, is I've long said that I ascribe a little bit. I mean, not really, but it is a funny thought experiment to me that if we assume that God is real, but he's evil, things start to make a lot more sense. I mean, they certainly don't make less sense. They start to make way more sense. And it's like, oh yeah, why are children born with terminal illnesses? Why is there so much injustice and cruelty? Why do bad people get away with crimes and they're never brought to justice? Why do living things need to consume other living things to survive? Oh, that's right, because God revels in our suffering and he's evil. Okay, that makes sense. So if I assume God is evil, Trump being blessed by God makes sense. Yeah, of course. Like, why wouldn't God support a guy like Donald Trump? Yeah, I mean, it's not like he's done a bang up job with everything else. So I just think that it's funny looking back on that. Oh wait, Diamond Dave said, to me, it's just Christians being Christians. That's just how they are. This is.
I want to address that, and actually, I'm going to push back on one thing you said, because you said, because when I was saying how I think it's just them using their Christianity to affirm that bigotry, and you said, well, you don't think you were saying that you think their Christianity kind of led them to that. This is why I disagree.
Okay,
I disagree because I think a lot of people already have an inherent sense of right and wrong, fair or whatever. And a lot of people who deconstructed out of Christianity or to a different form of Christianity did so because something in their heart told them, I like my gay friends. It doesn't seem right that they should not have the same kind of rights to love who they want. A lot of these feelings that caused people to deconstruct was because of how they felt about the gay community or whatever like that. And so that was them changing their Christianity because of something that they've already felt internally. And I feel like with a lot of Christians who are Trump supporters or homophobes or transphobes, they have an internal.
Oh no, Blerd, where'd you go? Well, I'll stay on and see if he can hop back on here. But I love where he was going with that, because he was talking about how people have this internal, morality that allowed them to push against the pernicious evils that were insipid. What I was trying to point out is that the reason that they had that inclination in the first place to be against homosexuality, that's not natural. Like, people aren't born as homophobes. They're created because Christian culture has told them to, be scared of it. And I was with Christian, sorry folks, that the thing with Christianity and people, that's right. A lot of times you'll hear people say something to the effect that, well, listen, the Bible is the source for our morality. Like, it's really important that we listen to it. And yeah, it doesn't get everything right, but you got to keep in mind that you follow these rules, things should go pretty well. Oh, here we go. All right. Hey, welcome back.
Sorry about that. What was the last thing you heard me say?
You were saying that people had like this internal morality kicking against this the anti-gay bigotry.
Right. Yeah. So basically, the TLDR is I feel like the reason why I think they're using Christianity to support a bigotry that they already have is because a lot of people who deconstruct either to a different form of Christianity or out of it was because of certain feelings that they had about love, compassion, empathy, and that was directing the direction of their faith.
Mhm.
And I think for Christians who are homophobic, transphobic, whatever, I think those are feelings that they naturally have, and they can use their faith to justify that. And I think if you feel strongly about gay people having the right to love whoever they love and that you don't think it's a sin, you can find a faith. Like you can pick and choose. People do it all the time. So you could become a Christian that is gay affirming if that's something that is important enough to you, as Christians do. Just like you can now be a Christian who thinks empathy is a sin, and you think that despite the fact that Jesus said to love your immigrant and the foreigner, and there's all these verses about it, you could still want to treat immigrants the way the Trump administration currently is. You can find ways to support whatever you're looking for.
Well, but it's, I don't know, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. That the answer is egg, by the way, folks. The egg came first. But the thing is that it's just riddle solved. Eggs came long before chickens. But what I was saying is that because like people aren't born homophobes, right? Like you're not just born with an innate anger or hatred against people who love the same sex or have sex with the same sex. And so that came from somewhere. And my argument is that came from the predominant Christian culture over the last, 1,000, 1,500 years. That's why they had it in the first place. And when you're taught that at a young age, like I was taught that being gay was wrong in single digits, So that's what I was coming is like, I think it still rests on, of course you can be a gay affirming Christian. I think if you try really hard, you can, but you got to try pretty hard. But that's all I was saying is that, like I don't like letting them off the hook with this. That okay, congrats, you solved the problem, but you kind of brought the problem here in the first place because not every culture isn't homophobic, but it seems the Abrahamic ones wildly homophobic, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with you. Absolutely. And that makes sense. I mean, I can see that. And I think if you look at it from a societal standpoint in terms of homophobia that you see society-wide being birthed or originating in the Christian roots that this nation has, I can see that. But like you're right, it's a chicken and egg thing. It could be a chicken and egg thing. You are taught from your early age how to look at these things. And so I can see that.
And like this is so back in the war on terror days where people would always talk about, they would make fun of Islam when people say it's a religion of peace. Yeah, there's a piece of you here, piece of you here, stuff like that and everything. Back in those days and everything. And folks would say, listen, read what's in the Quran, read what's in the Hadith, or listen to this radio host who tells me what's in it, more likely than not. And like, there's a lot of violent stuff in here. How could you possibly, back this up as being good? And once again, it's like you could do this. I saw a great bit. I wish I could remember who did it, but someone was reading passages from like the book of Numbers or Joshua or something, and say, "Listen how violent this is." This is in the Quran. Like, oh my God, the Quran says that, and there's actually it's in the Bible. It's just as violent. It's just as violent. And where was I going with this? That the Bible and the Quran is violent and shit. I forgot, man. What were we talking about? I remember. Is that and people will say that, well, they're twisting the words of the Bible. They're misinterpreting the Bible to fit their evil agenda. And it's like, have you cracked open a book of Catholic history and like tell me that this has been a peaceful organization for 2,000 years? It is one of the most bloodthirsty. Like you have the conquistadors, the Inquisition. You have like the Salem witch trials. They weren't Catholics, but burning people at the stake, boiling people alive for not practicing their particular version of Christianity. It's not limited to Catholics. Like what was it? Zwingli and Calvin Right? People were like going to war over whether the bread at communion actually turned into Christ. Not people died over this argument and shit. And it's like, okay,
Right.
I'm looking at the history of Christianity. It doesn't seem to be a consistent religion of peace, or even generally a religion of peace. You can be, of course. Like if you just take the words of Jesus, not all of them. Like Jesus, I got complaints about
Right.
Jesus too.
Some of them
But
are not too great.
Jesus gets a pass that he does not deserve it a lot of times. But for example, with Jesus talking about rich people, I love that you brought this up because Jesus spent his entire ministry shitting on rich people. Jesus never said a kind word about rich people his entire time on earth. And to see these folks flocking to Elon Musk and Donald Trump and say, oh, clearly they're the ones chosen by God. Jesus would never do that. Jesus would never say, hey, follow this rich guy. He's the one that's he's actually a camel that fits through the eye of a needle. It seems to be like an incredible misunderstanding or lack of knowledge about what your religion actually teaches.
No, 100% agree. 100% agree. It's again, they are already picking and choosing the things that they want to believe in, and if they wanted to have a more compassionate and empathetic Christian-based faith, they could. There are churches they could go to that. There are churches they could go to that could support that. There are verses, there are interpretations of the Bible that they could adopt. But you know, you got to ask yourself, why do they gravitate to one versus the other? So
I think the reason is I think I have a guess, and it's hard because not everyone thinks like me, right? That's like it blows my mind sometimes stuff that I hear. Oh, real quick, Diamond Dave wrote Mother Teresa is another example. Yes, fuck Mother Teresa. I know people act like she's like an amazing. Like, no. Mother Teresa extolled the idea of poverty, saying, no, it's not important to feed these people as much as it is to minister to their no, feeding them. Look, the Catholic Church has plenty of money. So anyway, but I'll stop on the Mother Teresa thing. But I think I know why they gravitate to that, because it's simpler. It's just simpler. That if I tell you, like we mentioned with the divine command theory, hey, God is a jealous God. He meets his judgment on those who disobey him. And I throw a few verses at you saying, God clearly says this is wrong. You can't deny it. God says that, man should not sleep with man. Boom. It's simple. And then people who wander away from that in any fashion, like you mentioned how the specific anger about trans people and why it bothers them so much, even though there's like, have they ever met a trans person? Like, good luck finding it. But they have this burning white hatred towards them because it upsets the very clear social structure and gender order that they're familiar with. And like, well, God is not the author of confusion. Hilarious sentence, by the way, in the Bible. It just cracks me up. And it's been nothing but confusion. And so you tell them that, it's like, okay, it's simple. But then we come along, like say Rob Bell, and he says, actually, everyone goes to heaven. And then they ask a very legitimate question. Then why bother with a religion at all? Legitimate question, right? Like I wonder that if people say that, it's like everyone goes to heaven. It's like, okay, so why bother going to getting up early on Sunday and going to church? Why bother following this list of rules? If I'm going to end up in heaven just like you, why am I going to waste my time? I think it's a good question. I do. And so then they're stuck with those choices of, hey, here's a simple, easy answer that you may not be able to explain. And here's something that seems like a complete waste of time. And they're like, okay, I'm going to go with the easy one. And, I'm scared of change, which most people are. That's just my guess. That's the only thing that makes any sense to me.
Yeah. For what it's worth, my answer to that question when I was a Christian would be, because I had the same question too. Like, if you're going to go to heaven anyway, and like to me, the answer to that question is one. It's not. If the only reason why you're doing whatever you're doing is because you want to get in heaven, one, that says a lot about you. But beyond that, in this world, what kind of relationship do you want to have with people around you? What kind of relationship do you want to have with God? Because until you go to heaven, you will have some kind of relationship with people in your community, and you will have some kind of relationship with God. And the choices you make in this life, like the reason why you would want to do some of these things, even if everyone's in good heaven, is because it will improve those relationships that you should supposedly care about. So that would be the answer. That's the answer that I would give to that question as to, well, why do these things anyway? Well, because I want to get along well with the people that I live with, right? So, if I knew that I would never go to jail, would I still go around like killing people
wait.
or stealing stuff or whatever? No, because I want to be able to live with the people that I care about.
But that answer is why be a good person. But like why specifically be a Christian is like the part that, because like you can do all those things and not know anything about the Bible, right? And be a
Because
good
if you want
person.
to have a relationship, that's the second part. If you want to have a relationship with
God,
the true living God, that's why you'd be a Christian. If you're a Buddhist, you're not going to know God. If you're a Muslim, you're not going to know the right version of God. So that's why it's a two-part answer.
Yeah, that second part is the only answer that would have any salience with me. I think that
as a Christian, for sure.
Why miss out on getting to know the creator of the universe? He wants to talk to you. It's like, all right, that does sound kind of cool. All right, I want to hear what this guy has to say. That would have been a decent answer. But then someone says, yeah, but you could do mushrooms too. All right, maybe I could try it that way, but I don't know. But we'll see. But all right, man, I kept you a little longer than I expected, but I really appreciated you hopping on here.
This was great.
I know. I would love to have you on again sometime. So we should do a TikTok live. Oh, did you start doing TikTok? I saw you do one like a month ago.
I don't do them as much as I should. Yeah, I don't really. I may do. I just don't have the time to.
They're hard, like at least for me, because the lives are really censorious in a lot of ways. Like I get kicked out of lives all the time, and for bullying and harassment.
I watch, and apparently doing them would probably like help my following, but I'm just, I'm at a point now where like when I do a live, I get like 20 people, or maybe I'll get like 100, but then it goes down to 20.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, why am I doing this? Like, I don't. I mean, if I really, you know what? If I knew for a fact that TikTok was going to be here past 60 days, I might invest in it.
Yeah,
but it's eventually it is going to go unless
it has been weird
somebody to buy it. And then if they do find somebody to buy it, chances are it's not going to be the person who I would want to buy it. So I probably not going to want to stick around anyway. So
yeah. If it turns into Twitter, I'd have to kick out of there, but I don't know. But for the meantime, where can folks find your content?
Yeah, basically on all the socials. I mean, most of the stuff I do is on TikTok at BlerdRonner. And then on Instagram, it's the same handle at BlerdRonner. I have most followers on TikTok. And if you just go to BlerdRonner.com, it has links to all the other stuff too.
Fantastic. All right. We appreciate you joining us, man.
Yeah.